We're at the 39th gate. By the way, you will have noticed, because we have covered more than 16 hexagrams in our work so far, that we are now getting to the second version of this cross of tension that we've met. And this is the second type, that is, that there's a different position for the personality sun. The first one we looked at, if you remember, was when the sun was in 21. This right angle cross of tension, 39, 38, 21, 48. So here the theme of tension gets focused through provocation. When it was in the 21, the theme of tension got focused through control. The 39th gate, obstruction. There is an inherent magic for us in this era with any of the gates that are part of this stream of emoting that goes from the 39 to the 12. Because this is a mutative stream, and it is going to carry the mutation of the emotional system into emotional awareness. That means that the 39th gate itself carries a great deal of importance, because for each of these mutative processes, beginning with first line mutations, each of them resulted from or were directly generated by the pressure out of the 39th gate. So the 39th gate, as an adrenal release, is extremely important for creating mutation. The energy to provoke or not. Above the lines in the book, it says, the value of obstruction in provoking analysis, assessment, and reevaluation. The moment that mutation takes place, this is one of the rules of how to deal with it. That is, analyze, assess, and then reevaluate. Real mutation turns the tables on things. And then it becomes essential to be able to understand what it's going to be like to live in a world with that mutation. The first line is called disengagement. Isn't that interesting? That is, the first law of provocation is to disengage. It is the basis of provocation. And it tells you so much about the human spirit, which is on the other side. Nothing causes us greater pain than abandonment. Nothing causes us greater pain than being left behind. It is deeply provoking. Because the spirit which lies within the 55th gate, that spirit that can open up to the emotional awareness, that spirit is inherently there to interconnect us. I've tried to find a way for students to describe the nature of how emotional awareness can operate. The first thing to recognize is that emotional awareness will come into the world, and it will come into the world through the emotionally defined. So there is going to be a basic genetic difference at that point between those that are emotionally defined and those that aren't. So imagine that you have these beings that are emotionally defined, and they're carrying within them the genetic mutation that opens up the neural potential of the solar plex. Every emotional being generates a wave. Imagine, if you will, that you have two emotional beings in each other's aura, and they're each putting out a wave, an emotional wave. Now that is a motor field. It's the energy of the motor at work. But even within the energy of that motor lies always the potential for awareness. What will be the experience for them, I cannot know. But what will happen is that as those waves, and I'm just doing this in a linear way, as these waves pass each other, there is an interactive field between the waves. This is where the awareness is. Now think about what that means. What that means is that we have within us two forms of awareness that are already functioning. We have one that is so strictly internal, the splenic awareness, that it can only have concerns for our very being itself. And that its awareness is not dependent on anything else. When you get to mental awareness, you begin to open up to the reality that we are not alone and that our awareness is something we can share. But we share it from our fixed perspective. We remain separate in the way that we share mental awareness. We have our opinions, our insights, our beliefs. But even though the other may accept those, may agree with them, we know within ourselves that the real meaning and values inherent in that are different in the two. We are not the same awareness coming to the same conclusion. We are different awarenesses coming to the same conclusion. When you get to the emotional awareness, that emotional awareness will operate as a whole. When you meet in the wave, you lose yourself. You lose your own awareness, and you enter into a fused or synthesized awareness. Quite different. That is, it is the beginning of us being able to come together as a totality, to link together as a totality. Disengagement. How to provoke. You provoke the human spirit by disengaging. Mars exalted the determination when confronted by obstacles to withdraw, but only temporarily. The energy to provoke by refusing to confront obstacles. This is a classic thing about being yourself. It was one of the funnier moments for me in a reading when I told a woman who had this line that she provoked people because she refused to deal with moments of crisis, refused to deal with those moments where she had to deal with some kind of obstacle. And she said to me, "Oh, I know. I've been trying to stop that. It's the whole thing about genetics. It's so easy through the 39 to really understand what it means to live out your nature. That 39 is looking for something. It's looking for the other side. It's looking for the spirit. And in looking for the spirit, what it is doing is that it is poking around to see whether the spirit is a nice spirit or a nasty spirit. To see how it can handle that energy. So what I said to this woman was, look, your boss calls you up and says, you have to come to the office right now. And you don't. Now, if your boss gets angry and fires you, you know you have the wrong boss. Because they have the wrong spirit for you. And if you have a boss that says, come to my office right now, I need to talk to you, and you don't go, and at lunch the boss comes up to you and talks to you then and doesn't get annoyed with you that you didn't come, you got the right boss. But if you give up provoking, You will never find the right spirit for you. This is not about having a motive to disturb the other. It isn't. It is a way to establish where the spirit is for this being in its life. The Mercury in detriment, disengagement with an accompanying indecision as to when to re-engage. Same principle, same thing. But the indecision is also a provocation. I want you to come and see me. Will you come and see me? And you don't go. As a matter of fact, in the exalted, you'll ultimately go. You can. But in the detriment, no, you don't. You're not sure about whether you should or you shouldn't and what the consequences are and blah, blah, blah. The boss, by the way, wanted to give you a raise. It's not about, it's just about being yourself. It's just about living out your nature. And the first thing to see is that in the fact that this is introspective, that what you're really looking for here is, what's the perfect provocation? What is provocation? Remember, the 39th gate is a gate of teasing. It likes to build the heat, to ultimately set the fire of passion. Because this is a stream of romance, where everything is built on tension and built on passion until that point, if it happens, of consummation. Second line. Second lines don't know they're provocative. So if you knock on their window, are you going to get it? Well, it's true. They don't know they're provocative. They're just going about their business. They don't even know they're looking for spirit. They have to be told that. You have to learn that. Second lines are where we have to go to school. Confrontation. The moon exalted. The instinctual and direct assault of obstacles. This is another story. You go right at them. This can be very, very provocative. So what happens is these people don't know they're provocative. You bang on their door, they go right at you. And you better have the right spirit for them or it's not going to work. Jupiter in detriment, the principle of preservation that tempts one to go around an obstacle that should be tackled head on. Now, by the way, it's the same thing. It's the same thing except that the exalted goes right at you and the detriment goes right around you. And it's just as annoying. So it's one of those things that the second line, you'll notice second lines have a bad reputation. Like the prima donna. Second lines have a bad reputation. And the whole thing to recognize about that bad reputation is that what happens is that these people don't know what they are in terms of their hexagram, and other people see them. Don't go near that person. They're really provocative. Look out for that one. And you look at them and you really can't, they seem okay, but don't distract them. Because the moment you distract them, you get their provocation. And by the way, all second lines are here to be called. You get what you get. So every second line gets called. Every 39 too is going to get distracted. And the moment they're distracted, they're going to let out their provocation. And the moment that they meet somebody who can deal with that provocation, they're going to be very happy. They will have found the right spirit for them. The third line. It's one of those things about how the 39 works and the way it works is that the 39 will tease you, but it will tease you to see whether you have any restraint. It's not baiting you. It's very different. They tease you in order to see whether you'll jump, whether you'll get angry, whether you'll get aggressive. To find the spirit. And you can imagine then what happens when you get to the third line here, because the 39.3 keeps on banging into provocative situations. I mean, they just can't help it. Remember, this is lower trigram. You know, they're self-involved in that process, and this is a very individual gate. The avoidance of confronting obstacles if failure puts others at risk. Now, this is an intro line, and this is the first intro line here in the 39. Most of these people so far are born to provoke. You know, this is a developed process in the third line. Right? Jupiter exalted, the great benefic whose first consideration is for the larger framework, the energy to provoke through self-sacrifice. This is the gate of eating disorders. So to provoke through self-sacrifice, you know, I'm not going to eat, you eat. You know, I'm going to sacrifice myself so you can have more. And the perverse way that can work depending on somebody's design, you know, I'm going to sacrifice myself, you know, because if I don't take that, then I'm going to get more for myself. I'm going to be a better being, whatever the case may be. There is a lot of problems with food here. This is the gate of eating. And of course, it is a gate that is going to be deeply affected by the emotional field, and it is an individual gate, so it is melancholic. And there is sadness and happiness that is part of the cycle of this gate. So this business of provoking through self-sacrifice, you know, these people can end up, if they're not properly nurtured as they grow up, they can be very, very insecure. And they can look for the right spirit by getting as disturbed as possible in order to see who can actually deal with them and love them even when they're so disturbed. Now, that isn't to say that that is always so. It's simply a matter of recognizing that that's inherent there within this line and within the gate itself. This is about food here. It is about moodiness. It is individual. It is all of those things. The earth in detriment, the often disastrous assumption that others are more at risk if an obstacle is not confronted. That is the energy to provoke through the failure to make sacrifices. You know, you're expected to make the sacrifice and you don't. And other people suffer as a result. You know, you're expected to make your contribution and you refuse because of your moodiness. And you affect everybody else in terms of what is going on. At the most mundane level, in the Maya, there is a need for forgiveness that is always there within that gate. And it's always there as long as that being is not themselves. The third gate, the third line should never be seen separate from its harmony with the sixth line. Remember how we've looked at the sixth line. We've seen the sixth line burns its fingertips at the beginning of its process and then gets to its point of aloofness and potentially wisdom. The way the sixth line acts at the beginning of its life is like the third line. Banging into things. That's its harmony. Banging into things, getting the experience necessary, and then withdrawing to its perspective. The third line is moving towards wisdom, always. Always. So there is a great deal of importance in third line processes. You know, if they really understand that it is not their fault. You know, the original subtitle that I had for the human design system was a handbook for no-fault living. You know, because this is what it's all about. the 39s end up feeling guilty all the time. They just end up carrying this burden of guilt. Because they don't understand their nature, they don't understand why they upset people. And they don't realize that what they are doing is truly finding out the difference between the wheat and the chaff. Getting rid of those forces in their life, recognizing those forces in their life that are not for them. Instead of feeling guilty because other people are upset. And then again, trying to provoke them by becoming ill or becoming a problem. When we get to the fourth line, we get to the upper trigram, we enter into another process. We enter into the beginnings of the transpersonal process. The fourth line is the foundation of the upper trigram. It's the responsibility of the fourth line to be able to transfer the essential information of the lower trigram and turn it into something transpersonal. So it has this very, very fixed process. This fourth line is called temperance. Here the 39 is aware that there is a 55 at the other side. That there is this emotional spirit moving in its wave at the other side. And therefore, temperance. Careful evaluation and assessment before taking action. It's very restrained. Right? It's the first knowledge that comes from the information of the lower trigram is that don't provoke all the time. Pick your shots. The moon exalted the values of feelings and instincts in establishing the proper timing. Somebody mentioned that to me the other day, how much this timing business runs through, and you see timing in so many lines. Perfect timing. Be yourself. I mean, it is magical. Be yourself. You know, this is this ancient image of ours of the perfection of the dance. You know, it is the body in time. It is its movement in space, in time. And we try to turn that into an art instead of being it, because that is all of us. Our natural grace is to be ourselves, this movement in space, in time. We do not set the timing. The dancer does not control the orchestra. And that's our beauty. And then whatever you are manifests correctly, whatever it is. Proper timing. The energy to provoke at exactly the right time. You know, they're great. Oh, they're a pain. They'll never let go of you. I mean, the best petty tyrants we have are the gates that come out of the root. You know, the petty tyrant is somebody that can always push your button. Always, always, always. And 39s and 38s, and there's all kinds of them. They are great button pushers. They put pressure on you. I mean, it's a pressure center. They put pressure on you. They stress you. That's what they do. And you see, if it's the right pressure, it's great. I mean, that's the beauty. The adrenaline system is incredible. I mean, this is the well of Kundalini. This is great stuff. Why do you think so many human beings have back problems? The sun in detriment. Interesting here, whenever you see the sun in detriment or the sun exalted or the earth or sun or the two earths, recognize that if that's part of a cross rather than just planetary. then it means that cross is skewered in a very specific way, and they make very interesting incarnations. And there are many, 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 many crosses like this in which you do not have the binary and the line at work because it's being fixed by either the sun or the earth. So here the sun in detriment, the faulty belief that willpower alone can overcome any obstacle regardless of circumstances. And this is so much the inherent nature of this fourth line fixed fate. I mean, it's really describing it clearly. They just have to externalize. They just have to provoke. These people are putting their finger in you all the time. I mean, they're hoping after a while that you're just numb, then it's okay. Geometry is wonderful, eh? The person that gets fingered that way, they deserve it. You know? I mean, that's the beauty of geometry. I mean, it's not like they're designed to be alone in doing that. You know, in the geometry of things, there's somebody who needs to have that button pushed all the time. It's just the way it works. Remember, it's out of this kind of provocation, out of this kind of energy, that mutation takes place. At the end of the fourth line, we have the change in the cross. And instead of the 39, 38, 21, 48, the 21, 48 changes and it becomes the 51, 57. And this juxtaposition cross, the 4-1, is the juxtaposition cross of provocation. And of course, you can imagine that these people are very fixed in being provocative. That is their fate, to be provocative. I wonder if Don Rickles. No, kidding. I mean, really. You know, it's that kind of, they can drive you crazy, eh? And they can do it funny, they can tease you, you know, they can do it vicious. The left angle cross. The left angle cross is called the left angle cross of individualism. These are very different people. And their process is a process of living out their pure individuality. You'll notice all four gates of the cross of individualism are in the individuality circuitry, individual circuitry. The fifth line. The fifth line is single-mindedness. The rare ability not to overcome but to bypass obstacles. They're individuals. They follow only their own rules. And remember, they're a fifth line, so they're the general. They can do that. If they can bring something practical, when they're given control, they can change the rules. After all, they're a mutative force. So when the fifth line is called to provoke, you know, we need you to provoke the people, we need you to whatever the case may be. That's the moment that they can change the rules. That's the moment that they do it their way, and they can't do it any other way. However, Neptune exalted. The imagination to establish new patterns that make the obstacles irrelevant. This is real mutation. The imaginative energy to provoke through bypassing obstacles. And you can only do that when you can bypass them practically. That you can go around them, but that going around them is not for you alone, that others may be able to follow that way. That's how mutation works. Mars in detriment, simple hard-headedness. Though less exalted, it can often result in success and gather support by its very determination. I mean, these are people who are very unusual in the way in which they can provoke the spirit. But again, they're projected on all the time. And because of that, they really have to be ready. The sixth line. The sixth line for us in our time is very important. That is, it is going to be exactly this line that is going to release the pressure to the 55-6, and we are going to have the initiation of this mutation in the emotional system. And as I said, that will begin in 2027. And that, of course, will only be in terms of that genetic mutation coming out in children coming into the world. It's a cycle for them to come into the world. This line called the troubleshooter. Again, the 39-6, when it's young, is going to provoke like hell. And by the way, they're good. Eh? I mean, it's a necessary energy. And of course, as a child, that is something that can get you into a lot of trouble with your parents and your siblings. And they learn very quickly that they better shut their mouths, or they better not make that face, or whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to do with talking. Eh? I mean, provocation can be just body science. And then they go and they step away and they don't provoke anymore. What they do is they watch everybody else and realize how easy it would be to provoke them and where. You know, the child that watches its mother and father and watches its mother try to get something from its father, and it knows exactly how she could do that. I mean, that child could write the handbook for the mother. You know, all you got to do is push that button, Ma. And if you push that button, that's what you'll get from him. I mean, they're great at that, but they say nothing. They just watch. They just watch. The natural gift for solving problems. Can you imagine what that's like? You know, you're a 10-year-old kid and you tell your parents how they can get along better with each other. You know, you provoke the hell out of them. This is the kind of person that says, I know what you need, and you get so annoyed. You know, I know what your problem is. It's very provocative. Now, of course, it's wonderful. There are people like that. They can be great at solving problems, but depending on their design, only through their design can they release that energy. If you're a manifesting 39, you better ask permission before you provoke somebody. Because otherwise you're going to be resisted, you're going to get punished, and you're going to end up being angry. And if you're a generator, you better wait to be asked to provoke. Because then you have your power, and then you provoke correctly. And if you don't, you end up being frustrated in your life. And you provoke all the wrong people at the wrong time about the wrong thing. You know, if you're a projector 39, you have to be invited to provoke. It's okay, you can get angry at me. All right, you know. It's dependent on your design. It's dependent on your authority. It's dependent on your type. And then these things operate properly. All these eating disorders that are rooted in this channel of moodiness disappear if that being is living out their nature and understands something absolutely essential. You cannot give reasons for chemistry. You cannot say, I am sad because. You cannot say, I'm happy because. It's not true. When the 39th gate stops making up reasons and lives out its own nature, then it's perfect in that. It is a true mutative force. Moon exalted practicality, and the ability to guide and nurture others. It's a wonderful line. And because they get burnt early, they rarely again in their life will come down from that hill and help you. You better go ask them. Mars and detriment, ego dominance, that generally abuses this gift for self-aggrandizement and personal ambition rather than for the benefit of others. The emotional drive to dominate that provokes others. This is the cross of individualism. They can be powerfully self-absorbed, these beings. And as such, may not care about whether they help somebody else or not, and if they do, it has to be of benefit for them. It has to pump up their spirit. When you move from the troubleshooter in the 39, when you get to the point of mutative energy, and you get to the stage of mutative energy where we are now waiting for this transition point, that the next step is to go to the 53rd hexagram to go to a new beginning.